Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Cantey, and this is another episode of Living Enlightened Every Day. And today I have my special guest, Edward Miller. He is the founder of SoulTranSync. He is also a spiritual teacher, speaker, and author. And he's inviting us to delve deep, kindling the embers of our imagination of what's possible, and allow enlightenment to begin to flood our mind. Sounds cool, right?
It does.
So he's going to share these powerful tools that he's refined and developed over 25 years plus of experience. And he shares it in his new book, Uncovering and Embracing Soul Power. We're going to tell you more about that. It's available on Amazon, and you can find out more about Edward at his website, SoulTranSync. So that's what I ask people. What do you do to live enlightened every day?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I've always been a seeker. I've been seeking for 35 years, looking for the answers that would feed me and make me feel whole. And I was just, rabid. I read every book. I went to every seminar, just like many do. But not until I learned about a practice um, called the Ho'oponopono did it all come together for me.
Mm.
I realized with the Ho'oponopono talks about zero. That's our true nature is zero.
Oh,
We're
wow.
not our stories, we're not our mind, we're not our emotions. We're zero. And Ho'oponopono is the practice of cleaning to zero, which is very similar to non-duality, because
Oh,
non-duality
yeah.
says, yeah, zero is nothing, and nothing is the truth of our nature. The unmanifested, the space, and that's once I started relating to that, to
Mm.
zero, I then realized that how powerful I was. And I also, with Ho'oponopono, was given some tools to do that with. And the tools of the Ho'oponopono are really simple, and they're transformative
Yeah.
because they speak to your subconscious mind and they speak to your heart. And the practice teaches the mantra is I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you. That's simple. I
Right.
love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you. Now, that mantra is not being communicated to anything in the world. That mantra is being related to you and your innocence. So
Yes.
as you say, I love you, you're loving your innocence. You say, please forgive me. You're becoming aware that some of your mind activities, some of your stories are are keeping you distracted from the truth of your nature.
Mm.
Because the truth of your nature again is zero or nothing or the space. So what I have been doing for the past, I guess, 15 years is practicing the Ho'oponopono. And I do it all the time. I'm always in Ho'oponopono mode. I'm always being aware of what's triggering me, what's coming up, what I'm feeling, and I'm taking it into the Ho'oponopono so it can be cleaned and let go of.
Mm.
That's all I do is I let go of things that come up in mind and sensations and memories. I'm just constantly cleaning to zero because I want to understand that in that state of zero, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing to be done. There's just love and there's openness and there's always an inspiration that leads from relating again to the zero. So
And
that's kind of what I
infinite possibilities
infinite
are
possible.
in nothing.
Yes, and
So
nothing.
if you know, if we're in the knowing, then we only know what we've already known.
Absolutely.
But when we're in not knowing or no thing, no thingness, it's infinite possibilities, and the unknown becomes known as inspiration, as you just said.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I believe that I live my life through inspiration. I'm I try to look at everything new because we're used to living life based on construct that we've been trained. Socialization, race relations, um, the church. You know, there's so many tools, so many vehicles for socializing us. But when you can release even all of those stories to the space, you can see things differently. You can relate to the world differently and be open hearted instead of caught up in your stories, your
Yeah.
programmed stories. Yes.
Sometimes our stuff is so dense and so thick, we call it walls or we call it
And
armor.
we relate to it.
Yeah.
All that caca boo boo, we're relating to. We're calling it true. We're calling it real. We're trying to understand it. We're trying to relate to it. And it's nothing there. So when you can go back to the space with please forgive me, please forgive me. And that please forgive me is just the awareness that what you're stuck in doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So the mantra again is I love you, which is I think a connection with my inner innocence. Please forgive me is an awareness that I'm always caught up in stories that I can let go of into the space. And gratitude for the awareness that that's how it works. The awareness that I remember my true nature. You know, I can reconnect with it at any moment and release all this, as I said, caca boo boo, and release it into the space and be free and be available, as you talked about, for inspiration.
Yeah. I gotta let this go. I gotta love myself. I gotta forgive myself. I've gotta remember.
This is a powerful moment for you.
It was unbelievable. And then I saw you looked onto your website and saw the Ho'oponopono. I'm like, oh, I need this. And I watched all the Hugh Lin,
Oh,
uh,
you did. Well,
every one of them.
Dr. Uland
Doctor.
talks about that there isn't an out there, and there
Right.
isn't anyone else. There's
Right.
just you and your perceptions.
Yes.
You really get that concept that all that you see out there is just your perceiving, and
Yes.
there's nothing out there but your perceptions.
Right.
It is powerful,
Well, and
and then
then
you
to
have to take
think that
yeah, and then you have to take responsibility for it
yeah,
too.
right.
You can no longer say, well, they're like that and they need to be like this, and I reject them, and this is good and this it's all you.
Like it was judging myself, but any kind of comparison, any kind of judgment, any kind there, it just gets more and more subtle. It just gets more and more subtle. So it was
Wow, what a great
subtle.
yes, subtle is a great word. It's a
Yeah.
great word. Because
But
we're and because it gets subtle, we can miss it sometimes.
oh yeah.
And we can write it off as it being well, that's just a thought. But if we're believing it, we're in it.
Yeah. Oneness, of course, indicates, two, but there's not non-duality, not two-ness,
Exactly.
just back to zero. I'm not sure, no thingness, and in no thingness is the creative power of the
It
universe.
is. I love the way you say that. I
Yeah.
love the way you say it. I, like many people, have had righteousness. I believe I know, and this is what's best, and everybody should hear me, and my side is, it means something because I've been through that righteous indignation that we feel. I've learned that that's the trigger that sends us into delusion. But when we can feel that righteousness and let it go, it is beautiful because we don't have to hold on to it anymore. We can let love out, and we can be compassionate to ourselves and others. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, what it's all about. It's not about judging others and making others wrong and seeing how they're different, but how we're all the same, and how we can all and I can look in somebody's eyes and see myself. That's beautiful.
Well, that is, I think, the miracle of living in this uh zero, this our true
Yes, zero.
nature,
Yes.
is that it doesn't matter how anyone else shows up, we get to see love.
Well, what the whole component has also done for me is given me a context for my mind. Our minds are always coming up with something, right? We're always coming up with explanations and understanding and reason, and all that's caca. But the whole Ho'oponopono has given me the opportunity to see how my mind takes on, the colors of the mind, and realize that it doesn't have to be, I don't have to cling to it. I don't have nothing, I don't have to be right. Nothing has to be right.
Right. Yeah.
And wow, does that take you back to peace?
Well, freedom.
Freedom.
People think freedom is this thing that they have to do or they have to get or
Aspire for, yes, yes, yeah.
oh, freedom is not being subjected to our own
Ex-
thoughts, our
Hello.
own mind. That's
Not being subject to
freedom.
our own tyrannical minds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that too. Of not being so addicted to, you talked about subtlety. I've become very aware of the subtleties of my judgments and my emotions and my sensations. And instead of, resisting them, because that's what we want to do. I don't want to feel that, or that can't be right, or I don't want to be that. I don't want to believe that story. Instead of resisting it, just allowing it to come and move, allowing it to move through your body energetically, to feel things, feel everything, and not cling to anything
Yeah.
with a story. That's a powerful way to live. You're always, but let me, you know what, and I want to see if you can relate to this. This process is not always easy. And I hate to tell it, say it's hard, because it's not hard, but it's not always easy. You have to be paying very close attention. You've got to not just get lost in thoughts and ideas. You got to be paying attention to what's going on in your feelings, what's going on in your field, what you're believing. You've got to pay attention to that. Because
Yeah.
if you're not, you're just caught in it. You're deluded by it.
Absolutely. That's the observer, the witness.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and paying attention and is I think one of my big things was being able to it's once you've kind of practiced being the observer or the witness, then it becomes sort of a way of living. And it's
Mhm.
like there's so much space. Sometimes I'm doing this thing where I'm like watching myself going, really? You're
I
gonna
know
do
the
that?
same way.
You're gonna do
I
that
am
again?
exactly the same way. Well, how did I come up with that? That's what I say. What?
And then it's like, oh, I'm sorry, please forgive me. I
Yes,
love you.
I love you. I love you. Yes. Let me tell you one thing about Ho'oponopono that I did that I want to talk to your audience about. I programmed it into my subconscious, meaning that I have videos and audios. I would sit and just allow myself in meditation to have the mantra ground into my psyche, and it became my new self-talk.
Beautiful.
We're used to being judgmental and critical of ourselves, and judgmental and critical of others too. But with the Ho'oponopono, you changing the direction of your interest. You're now about loving yourself, which opens the world to love others. You're about being compassionate to yourself, which allows you to be compassionate to others. You also learn to be nurturing to yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, just patient with, okay, there I go again. There I'm stuck in that stuff again, and it's making me feel this way. But thank you for that awareness, and I can let it go in space. It's
Mhm.
that kind of new relationship that you have with yourself, which helps you to navigate the world in a whole new way. But, I want to tell you how much I'm impressed with you doing a podcast, because this path of self-awareness is not linear. It's not straight
Yeah.
up. All of a sudden you're awake one day and say, oh my God, now I see it all. It is random. And some days you have days when you're way over here and you're wondering, how did I get over there? And your emotions are raging, and you're trying to find understanding, but there's no understanding to be found. And it really is important that you have other people, other other relationships that you can talk to and say, and they say, yeah, I know how you feel. That empathy means a lot to me in this path.
Yes.
I mean, even we talked about Charles Geddes. When I'm in my story, for whatever my story is, I call Charles Geddes because he says,
Oh,
get out of your story, Ed. And I'm like, oh, okay. I can do that.
it's that simple.
It is really that, isn't it that simple sometimes when someone just tells you get out of your way?
Yeah.
I think those kind of friendships are very important.
Yeah.
They're very cherished friendships. So I understand that.
Well, we were talking about community too. You find that your community in some ways gets a little smaller and a little smaller, but in other ways it's more global in the sense
Yes.
that you realize how many people are speaking. not necessarily the same language because I can translate. I love Joel Goldsmith and
I do
Richard
too.
Rohr
I do too.
and oh gosh, who else were we listening to? Just some. I love Rupert Spira.
Oh, are you kidding me? He's my favorite.
Yeah, we're gonna
I
get one
love
of
Rupert
these
Spear. I
things.
love him. He is the simplest teacher.
Simplest,
That's
yes,
really straight. He has a video where he talks about who we are as happy. We are
yeah.
happy.
Well, and I've been saying
Well,
that for years, but no one believes
exactly.
me.
No, nobody believes. But I love him, and I read all his books, and when you get to this stage of self awareness, and I'm not saying it's a higher stage or lower stage. I'm just saying when you get to a certain level in self awareness, you need books and music and things that kind of reinforce where your heart is. I believe you do. So
I do too.
I listen to Adyashanti. I don't know if you
Oh
listen.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and Muji
Yes.
and Rupert Spira, and there's other great non-dual teachers that I just really can relate to. And when I listen to them, they make things clear for me again. I got on my ego and I get present and I'm very aware and peaceful, and I enjoy that about those artists, how I can relate to them.
Well, I love that you call them artists. It brings us, it's a pointer back
Yes.
to ourself
Oh,
so that
that's very
we
good. Yes.
experience ourself. If we're just reading books and listening to people and it's out there still, then we're missing the boat a little bit, but we'll get
I
there.
agree with that. I agree with that. That's interesting where you're saying, if you're right, if I'm reading it for new information,
Yeah, yeah.
then you're believing that you're not already it.
Yes.
When you're reading it for relationship and
Yes.
connection, it feels different. It feels holy to you when you read
It,
some of that stuff. Yeah.
I love how you said
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it does. It feels
Yeah.
holy. It feels like, and it feels like you know them. It's like, I know you.
Yes.
I
Oh,
know
I
you.
absolutely. I met Muji, by the way.
You did.
I went to one of his events in Portugal because I just felt compelled to. That's when I was idealizing teachers.
Oh,
We
okay.
all go through that stage of idealizing teachers.
I get it.
I know we did. I know you did. We all go through that stage. But when I was idealizing Muji, I wanted to see him. And but one of the great things about seeing him and him giving me a hug and really, I felt like I was him. He was no longer this ideal teacher. He was me. And man, did I leave Portugal feeling whole and getting and understanding things a little differently.
Well, and that is amazing. And I think that is ultimately the point of any teaching, of any book that we read is like pointing us back to our experience of our wholeness.
I love that.
Yeah.
I have a on my website, you can download it. I have an inner child meditation,
Yeah.
which is beautiful. And it incorporates music and binaural and isochronic brainwave. And I use it a lot with my clients. It is so transformative
All right.
because
I'm doing
it
it.
it gets you to relate to your innocence
Mm.
and start a dialogue with your inner child. And it is a beautiful place to start. Beautiful place to start.
I think that's what we're going to do. It's going to pop up on the screen and we're going to be able to go there and I'll have that written out and the link on the show notes as well. But because we didn't talk about your SoulTranSync yet, and then but the music and you call them the binaural and what?
Isochronic.
I don't know what that means.
Well, binaural is is it when you put on earphones, you have to use earphones
Hmm.
to binaural, and each ear is getting a different wave, a
Oh,
different
okay.
a different frequency,
Okay.
and the center of your brain is interpreting that frequency at a certain point, and it's helping you to go into deeper, uh, beyond alpha meditation. It takes you into the theta state, and the theta state of meditation is just this open, spacious place where you're just open, and it's beautiful. So I'm a real advocate of going into theta, and that's the binaural. But isochronic brainwave is a beep, 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 beep. I don't know if you've ever been to a meditation, a group, and you hear just a tapping, very, very subtle. Well, that tapping, if it's at the right brainwave, will bring the group into deeper into meditation.
Oh, wow.
So some of the meditations I have both isochronic and so you can listen to them in groups without earphones, but you can also get deeper when you allow yourself to put on earphones and go into the
I
space.
was at my doctor's and he said something about he's like, oh, you're just getting older, and he's about my age. And I kind of looked at him. He goes, well, you're just going to have to face the facts sometime. And I said, no, you do. You have to face
Yeah,
the facts because you're a doctor. So you have to look at some book and some facts and some
yeah, I
statistics.
can be.
I
Oh
don't
yeah,
have to look at that at all. I just turn within and I
yeah,
just feel how I feel, and it
exactly,
feels
exactly.
good. 'Cause-
Well, what's interesting to me is that there's always good advice and how to live appropriately and how to be like this and I think that as being self-aware, you have the capacity of letting not having to buy into every good idea that comes up. Because some ideas are good ideas for someone else. But me, I stay free. I just want to be open. I want to be aware of the space, and I want to not get caught up in any story that puts me in a box. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Box. This is the aging box, and it
absolutely.
looks like this, and you behave like. My children would love to put me in the aging box. They love to seeing their daddy in a box. But I shake them. Like,
Makes
ah,
them feel good. They know where you stand and where they
yeah,
stand.
they know where I stand on things, so I don't know.
So the Ho'oponopono and the binaural beats that you do is a way for us to um, kind of be self-aware, letting go of the stories. Is that what?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it.
When I talk about um, using the mantra to help to ground into your psyche,
Mhm.
it really is about living free
Yeah.
because the psyche is about I love you, I'm sorry, please give me, thank you. And the more you repeat that mantra in your subconscious mind, the more, first of all, things are going to come up because our subconscious mind has a lot of memories and trauma and energies that want to be expressed. So you're going to have feelings that are going to be evoked as a result of that mantra. But what happens is that when those shadow feelings are brought to light, you don't have to do anything but say, please forgive me. You don't have to go to a psychiatrist and get it understand it. You don't have to figure it out. You can just allow the energy of it or the memory of it to be released in light. And I love that part of the Ho'oponopono.
I
I
love
used to
that.
believe, even though you have to go through years of therapy and figure everything out and have understanding, all that does is keep you, if you can ground the Ho'oponopono mantra into your psyche, everything is cleaned.
Yeah.
Everything is made light
Yes.
because you don't have to hold on to anything. You don't have to cling to anything that comes in mind. And I think that's the beautiful part of it. About drilling that mantra into your psyche. And that means
Hmm.
listening to it when you're in the car. Maybe part of your meditation day will be sitting with a mantra of the Ho'oponopono going on so that you can kind of allow yourself to go into the subconscious and be available for that. And then also there's the inner child work.
Yeah.
I'm a real advocate of reconnecting with your innocent self.
Yes. It's beautiful.
Oh my God. You know what? And I talk about that in my book, but when I reconnect with my innocent self, it changed the context of my relationship with my mother.
Yes.
Oh my God, it changed the context of my memories of her. It just really it gave me so much peace in my because I was that kid that, had all those childhood traumas and all that kind of stuff. Ho'oponopono cleaned all that up.
Yeah. I love that.
I don't have any what was your question?
No, I was just going to say that's when I said I had done forgiveness work, and I said it had huge results. The biggest results were around my parents.
Absolutely.
Now, I didn't tell them what I was doing, but I would get these phone calls out of the blue from like my dad when he was alive. This is a long time ago, and he would just call me out of the blue. How you doing? And I'm just like, what's wrong? Like, why are you calling? I'm good, I think. What's happening? Because he would never call me. I mean, he would just never, you have to call him, you have to make an effort to see him, and if you don't, you're in trouble. Like, it was just this thing. And I would call my brothers. Dad called me. Why? I don't know, because I'm doing this forgiveness work. I couldn't say.
Exactly, and
Like,
it really is. I mean, I completely understand what you're saying. The
yeah.
forgiveness work, when I say it changed the context, I used to always I always tell myself this story about I was this abused child by my mother.
Mm,
She was mean and she was harsh and I just had all these horror stories that I had, and I told those stories for years to my family, to other people, because I felt, what happens is we believe is though those stories identify us. They're
yeah.
our identity. Well, when I was going through my forgiveness work and my inner child work, and I forgave all of that, first of all, I became stronger, but I also became more compassionate for my mother and what she had to bear, and the traumas that I would claim that I had with my family seemed to not be very important anymore.
Yeah.
It seemed to not be even worth telling anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's interesting too, because I do find that I have that thing. People will say, what about, can you just tell us your stories, or what happened when you were, or all the, and I'm like, uh, and if something happens that I can tell the story, they're like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, I guess that is, yeah, that happened to me. Right. But it isn't even, I'll say, like an available memory. I actually have to, like dig through.
Exactly. And it's
And
sometimes before it felt real. I could remember that
yeah,
righteous indignation. I would feel, oh yeah, this is true. This is what happened. Now I'm not even sure what happened when I was a kid. It was all good that I can remember.
wow.
Oh, my
Oh.
mother was a ball. You know,
It changes everything, because
yes,
we become part of the fluidity of reality with a capital R, let's say, and we're not stuck in the rock of what we think. And
yes,
that
what we're
rock
thinking.
isn't even real. The what's real is the no thingness. And it is weird. It's identifying with the
People have had terrible trauma.
you know,
You can't get rid of trauma if you're all you're doing is rehashing it over and over again the rest of your life. There's no opportunity. Dispenza talks about that. You've
yeah.
got to have a
He
new
does.
story. You got to have a new story that you start putting some energy into. A new story about love, a new story about forgiveness. You
And
got
the
to have a
truth
new
of your
story,
being.
the truth of your being.
Yeah.
But I don't want to give your audience the impression that this is always easy.
No.
Yeah.
No, no. And I wouldn't ever say that it for me, there's not only an investigation, but you know, a path and a practice of being compassionate with ourselves
Yeah.
first. We
Yes.
can't have compassion for that person who we think caused trauma or was participating in trauma or abuse or neglect or whatever it is. It, if we don't have that compassion for ourselves first, and
Yes.
for our boundaries and the armor that we've put up. But as we learn these techniques, the Ho'oponopono
What
and
about when the
self-love,
shadow gets triggered? You're now, facing feelings and thoughts that they were so intense and so scary for them that they've been suppressing
yeah,
and distracting themselves from their whole life. But in order to heal, you've got to be willing to see what you're contracted in.
yes. And so something in you says, let it go now. It's time.
Mm, yeah, it's time to
There's a
let it go.
tool now, the Ho'oponopono or the
Yeah,
binaural, the meditations, the inner child work. So they start picking up the tools. And I think then, yes, there's that initial trigger, or investigation, let's say, without someone who has maybe lived through it and can
I
put
agree.
it in perspective with you. I think that's probably pretty important.
I
And
do think it's important.
Yeah,
What do you do with people who love their story so much that that giving their story up, whatever it is, a story of abuse or neglect or betrayal, whatever to give it up, would they feel as though they'd be losing their identity? What I found that from those situations is that all I can do is create the space.
yes,
And
absolutely.
that's what I do. When they're enchanted with their stories and it means so much to them and they can't be willing to see anything other than their story, their trauma, I just create the space for them. And I
Yeah,
assure them that there's another way of looking at it. And and they have every right to feel what they feel, because you don't want to ever give people the impression that what they're feeling is wrong.
of course.
Yeah.
Well,
They've got
and like we say, there's no denying.
yes, there's no denying what you feel.
It's
You
like,
feel what you feel.
yeah, yeah. It's not. It's the opposite of denying. It's actually moving into it in a new way
The
with a
way
strong heart, and holding someone's hand. It's like you're not alone anymore. If you were alone then, you're not by yourself anymore. You're looking at this with someone who can be right with you as you are able to see from the truth, from your power, from your love and compassion. And it's like, oh, I couldn't have imagined that happening by doing forgiveness work. I couldn't have said, this is what I want to happen.
through most of my 40s, because I'm in my 60s now, with most of my 40s, I was in pain, constant back pain. And your back is your support system,
Oh, yeah.
your stability. And I could barely walk. I was at a stage in my life where I could barely walk. And I know it's because I was contracted with all these horror stories about who I was and what I had to bear. And not until I started to change my relationship with my back pain and
Mm,
change my relationship with my mother and that story did I start to realize I didn't have to be in pain at all. I'm gonna
wow.
have discomfort sometimes, and I may feel stiff a little bit, but the suffering pain that I was in through much of my 40s, gone.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
How do people relate to you now that you're this more aware being?
Being around family, and it's a Catholic family, and not having a spiritual center here locally, it does feel a
Can I
little
say the word?
isolating.
Can I say the
Oh,
word?
yeah,
Can I say it?
yeah.
Lonely.
Lonely. Yes, yeah.
I think that self-aware people go through stages of feeling lonely sometimes.
Yeah, and that's part of this podcast.
It is, yeah, okay, good. That's good. But I
Reaching
know a
out.
few years ago I was so lonely. And I'm not lonely anymore. I don't know what has evolved in my point of view, but I felt very isolated and very lonely on my path towards self-aware. I'm just being real honest with people. I don't want
Absolutely.
to
Well,
lead this is an easy path all the time, and every day you're having these epiphanies and feeling good, because there's some energies that I had to move through. And because I was so committed to the Ho'oponopono, stuff was coming up left and right to be cleaned. And
yeah,
my wife would see me a little bit emotionally distressed and anxious sometimes. She'd say, "What can you do?" I said, "I need to feel all of this now.
yeah,
I need to feel whatever this is, I need to be here with it. Instead of running from it or explaining it or taking medication for it, I need to feel it."
yeah.
So this has been fun.
I know we covered a lot, and
We
I'm
did.
just really grateful to you. As I said, you popped into my life at a time where it was just so it was so, and that's a perfect example of what I was saying. Is like my intention. I had kind of fallen asleep on this, and this little things were so subtle, and I had fallen asleep a little bit, and my words are being broadcast. My silliness was being broadcast over the whatever the waves, like literally, not just philosophically or you know in another dimension. It's literally happening, and forgiving myself for, and loving myself, and seeing the truth, all of those things, being able to do all of that. That's living enlightened every day, and
Yes.
integrating spirit, mind, and body, relationships, the body of affairs, all of it.
Letting go of your problems too. You start realize there is no problem.
Right.
Yeah, there's really no problem here. It's just whatever I'm contracted in and believing in this moment. Maybe I can see it differently.
Yeah. But I have enjoyed talking with you so
I've
much.
enjoyed you very much also.
And I just know listeners are going to get so much out of this. So I invite them to go to your website. It's www.soul, S-O-U-L, tran, S-T-R-A-N, sync,
Yes,
sync.com. That will
that's
be,
perfect.
it
Yes.
will pop up on the screen like that, and it'll be be able to click on it in the show notes. So I'm just grateful to you and your website, your products, and I'm really excited to read your book. I'm sorry I didn't read it yet.
Oh, you'll read, and I hope you enjoy it. Get your
I
feedback.
am gonna read. Well, that'll be our next talk. It'll be about the
Okay,
book.
I'll definitely come back on.
Oh, good. Well, thank you again, and I just want to thank the listeners, and from Edward and I both. Just we hope that you spend this week laughing, loving, and living in life
Laughing, yes, laughing is good.
every day. Laughing is good.